Hi everyone, I'm Greg from Pilot Institute. We train drone pilots all over the country.
Hi, my name is Haye from DroneXL, where we cover all the drone news on our website.
Welcome to the latest episode of the PiXL Drone Show, our weekly podcast where we talk to industry professionals about what they do in the UAS space.
From professionals who use drone to fly inspection missions to public safety users or even drone light shows, you will learn on the PiXL Drone Show that drones are much more than just toys.
Well, it's been a long time no talk, Haye.
Yeah, right?
At least several hours.
Exactly. Sometimes we record shows back to back because we have to, especially in the summer vacation period when people are traveling, not just Greg or me, but also our guests. So sometimes we, like today, we record them pretty much back to back.
Yeah, but then we're warmed up and ready to go. I'm actually excited because we're talking to Freefly today, and I actually didn't know that. But looking on their website, they have they're more than just a drone manufacturer. So we'll talk about this. If you've ever heard the Movi cameras, and they have what I call the camera porn. I've watched these videos.
They got a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, of gimbals, and if you see gimbals on cars and gimbals on motorcycles, and they have really cool stuff. So, and then obviously big drones that carry big equipment. So this is exciting. We were talking about movies that use drones now in FPV. Did you anything you saw recently that had that?
There are two movies, and I think both of them, I believe, are on Netflix. So if people are Netflix subscribers, then definitely check these out. One is Red Notice, the other one is Ambulance. Both of them came out not too long ago, and they feature FPV drone shots in them. And I think it's awesome. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago when I first saw, I think it was a bunch of skiers going down the slope and jumping and flipping in the air, and then the FPV drone would like fly around them. So as a viewer, it felt like you're part of the action. And I remember when I was watching that, like, all right, so this is going to be in the next James Bond movie, for instance. And so now you have two movies, Ambulance and Red Notice. There are other movies as well, of course, where we have FPV drone shots. But if you haven't seen them, definitely go watch them. I don't even care about the rest of the story, but just to be able to see how we're now using FPV drones with cinema cameras on them to get those impossible shots is really cool to see.
I think that's what we needed. We needed to go away from the FPV with the GoPro on it to being able to lift these big cameras that have. But you think about this, like 10 years ago, this was impossible because 10 years ago we were flying. Well, maybe not 10, but 20 years ago we were flying large cameras on gimbals inside of helicopters that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And now we've miniaturized these high quality cameras we can put on FPV. It's really exciting to see this. I watched Top Gear, the British TV show, about cars, and the last 2 seasons they've been using FPV drones. They've never done that. They've always had amazing aerial videography, but it was never FPV. And then now they do it. They can chase people inside of the forest, and it's just really cool to see that we're getting to that level. So it's
insane. I mean, have you seen that Porsche commercial that was shot by Johnny FPV where he flies into the car and then through the car, basically? I mean, it's insane the kind of shots that you can get with FPV. So
almost doesn't look real.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm excited to talk to Freefly. I also want a Freefly gift card for my birthday, I think, because they got a whole bunch of cool stuff on their site. But yeah, I'm super curious to talk to them and learn what they're up to, and also if they're potentially going to launch an FPV drone, because I think it's kind of up their alley in a way.
Yeah, and I'm interested because they're a smaller manufacturer. They're not small; they're a smaller manufacturer, and I'm excited to kind of get in their brain talking about how they do this, and then also talking about remote ID because, it's around the corner, and I want to pick the brain of these manufacturers and see where they are. So it will be interesting. So let's get them on the show. So how did you guys get kind of together and thought about this company, Freefly, and get it started?
Yeah, well, Tab and Dave are the founders of Freefly, and we kind of came in later to join the AltaX team. So I had a company that was doing a lot of research and development around drones and a lot of custom development for companies, kind of one-off science project type of stuff, as well as small batch manufacturing of some production aircraft that we did. And we were acquired by Freefly last year to kind of bolster the AltaX team and kind of help bring the AltaX into the industrial market and kind of expand the market that we had, because the AltaX was primarily used for cinema when it was first developed, and now it's way more into the industrial mapping world. So my company is acquired to kind of help with that, and then Matt was hired to help keep us in line.
Yeah. So if we go back to the beginning of Freefly, like when did you guys get started, and what were the first drone models that came before we now have the AltaX?
Yeah, so Freefly started 10 years ago or 11 years ago, and the first products that Freefly was making was kits. So it was a Sinistar kit, and they were making these kits in tabs, I think Mom's Garage, and then they were selling those. And then they were making Radian, which Radian was basically like a gyro that you'd use to make servo-based gimbals. So they had some kits, and then the huge smash success for Freefly to take it from kits to products was the Movi M10, which was the first open architecture brushless gimbal. The DJI had some brushless gimbals, but they were specific to one camera, and then there were some kits. But the Movi was a gimbal that you could kind of balance it for whatever type of camera you wanted within the weight range, and then that just like rocketed Freefly into another dimension at that point. And then from there was the Alta 6, which was not a kit, but a 6-rotor helicopter multi-rotor. And then there was the Alta 8, and then it was the Alta Pro, and then it was the Alta X, and now it's the Astro.
There you go.
And we're making high-speed cameras and all sorts of other fun things as well that all are kind of related.
I was going to say that. I mean, I was looking at your website earlier, and it's not just drones, is it?
That's right. RC cars and high-speed cameras and gimbals and kind of all that stuff that you need to control it, and the accessories, focus wheels, all the kind of things that a lot of our cinematographers need to really dial in their setups.
Is the focus drones, or are all those products equally represented, let's say, in your sales?
I think the focus is moving, at least in the beginning, was moving cameras and camera tools for the cinematography industry. We've obviously grown past that. Now it's moving sensors, whether that's a LiDAR sensor or a mapping sensor. But I think that drones and the wave camera, the high-speed camera, are definitely and the Movi gimbals are the primary focus for now. Yeah.
Is drones like, and by the way, I just love going on your website just to look at gear and kind of geek out and think about all the stuff I can never afford. But it's just amazing to me looking at these, like you said, high speed gear on cars and with the arms and everything. It's just so cool. So are drones, like, what would say the percentage of your business is represented by drones versus everything else?
I'll let you take that one, Matt. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I would have to look at it to dial that in and give you a specific answer. But to help you kind of understand a little bit more about how Freefly has worked over the last decade, it's been very much a team that's been focused on releasing products that are developing the latest cutting edge technology, and we've wanted to really build out this kind of ecosystem around that. Right, it's just enable for us to sustain these products for a long time and to continue to make them better after we launch them. We've moved to this kind of product line strategy. So Max and I are really focused specifically on the AltaX, and we're building up an entire team of engineers and support people and production people and sales staff, etc., all based around AltaX. There's a whole nother team around Astro, a whole nother team around our power system. So we're making our own smart batteries now in-house in Washington as well. There's a whole team around gimbals. We make our own project management software in-house. It's called Waloo. There's a whole team around that, etc. So we're standing up these individual teams with all their own functional groups inside of Freefly so that we can support these products through their entire life cycle and continue to make them better even after we launch them. So that's kind of why Max and I got brought into the fold here. And again, we are all one big happy family at Freefly and all work together, but we've kind of strategized ourselves into these different product lines so that we can keep our focus and use that special power of focus to really put out the best products possible.
Yeah. So
how many employees?
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, how many employees total in the company now?
That's a great question. I also don't know the exact number. We've acquired 5 companies in the last 2 or 3 years.
Close to 70-ish, but I don't know the exact number.
Yeah, wow. I think 70 is probably a good guess at this point.
Yeah,
specifically focused on the drones.
Specifically focused on the drones. So that wouldn't include people working on gimbals and other parts of the company.
Right.
Cool. Is drones the future for Freefly, or are you going to keep the other components as well?
Yeah, absolutely going to keep the other components as well and expand into other product lines. We've got a couple other product lines in the works that we can't talk about just yet, but we're really excited to share those when they're ready too.
All right. Well, maybe we can get back to that later in the show, but no.
Yeah.
So the Alta 6, the Alta 8, the Alta Pro, I believe, are all discontinued. So you now have the AltaX with the foldable arms, and you have the Astro. How do these two drones compare? Like, who are they catered to, and how are they the same or different from each other?
Sure.
You want to take that, Max?
Yeah, sure. The AltaX, the bigger difference is the size. The AltaX can carry up to 35 pounds of payload. Where the Astro is closer to about 3 pounds of payload. The Astro is just the latest and greatest in terms of the interconnectivity between the drone, the payload, and the operator. So on the AltaX, when you purchase the AltaX, any of the payloads that you're getting, they're going to be from either one of our distributors or one of our partners, or the customer is going to integrate the payload themselves. Whereas with the Astro, that has kind of it's called smart dovetail. And that allows you to connect a camera that we're selling an A7R package right now, but there'll be other payloads that we'll release as well. And that basically allows the payload to be completely controlled and interfaced with the drone and the controller on the ground. So the Astro is a much more interconnected drone. We're hoping to take what we've learned from the Astro and then port that over to the AltaX in the future. But those would be the main differences. And the Astro is really for like industrial use case, more mapping. There's people using it for wildlife tracking, first responders, or emergency services. And the AltaX is used a lot more for LiDAR, mag surveys, things like that. Obviously, cinema.
Would it be fair to say that the Astro then kind of competes, but perhaps with the Sony AirPeak, or?
They're in the same market, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
With more battery time?
Hopefully.
Sorry.
Had to throw it out there.
Yeah, well, I haven't had a chance to fly the AirPeak yet, but we're getting up to 37 minutes of flight time with Astro.
Yeah, that's about that's 3 times more than the Sony drone, I think.
And another huge difference is we made our own gimbal for the Astro, where the AirPeak's using a Grimsey, which is a third-party gimbal. So I think that kind of trying to keep everything in-house is something that Freefly's really tried hard to do. And having control over the gimbal allows us to kind of control the whole workflow and the quality control and the support and everything else like that. So I would say that's a huge difference between those two.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Astro gimbal is fairly compact, sitting underneath the aircraft, which is I like that design specifically. So everything manufactured in the U.S., right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, just north of Seattle and Woodinville.
Yeah, we have offices in Woodinville, Washington, and then Max's team is all out based in the Philadelphia area.
Ah,
okay. How difficult is it today to manufacture drones in the United States? What are some of the challenges you guys are seeing? I see your head shaking, Max.
Man, it is tough. It is hard. Building hardware is hard, as they say. Not only from designing and the first principle standpoint, and just using this bleeding edge technology to try to incorporate it and miniaturize it, but the supply chain too, and just trying to manage hundreds or thousands of parts that these drones are made up out of, and trying to get everything to get delivered in just the right time and build at just the right time to make it all come together is quite the symphony.
Yeah, the building isn't that hard. It's the supply chain. It's like just going from doing a few drones versus going to doing a ton every single month is just like a whole nother game. So that logistic stuff is extraordinarily hard. And luckily, we have an awesome team, who all work together to keep those logistics running smoothly.
This might be a weird question, but why not take what may sound like the easy option of manufacturing overseas?
Matt, you might have a good answer for this. The one I've heard also is just, or I've said rather, is it's just like much harder to control the quality. I think that's we have like a obsession
Yeah, absolutely. We are absolutely obsessed with quality. We test all of our products extremely rigorously, not only during the development phase, but actually throughout the production phase. Everything gets put on a test stand after it gets built to be, do hardware in the loop and software in the loop testing on a test stand. And then we actually physically go out and manually fly, with a person out at the test field, every single drone before it goes out to somebody. So, all those checks that go throughout that production process to ensure that quality is there is just really, really hard to manage if you're having someone else do it for you through contract manufacturing, or, especially if it's in a different country. So we prefer to do everything as much as we can in-house, and, it makes our production and our development slower, but our quality is higher, and our confidence level is extremely high. So we'll continue to do that.
Yeah. Sounds like it's working out for you guys. I mean, in the last couple of years, you said that you bought, I think you said 5 different companies. At the same time, we had to deal with COVID. We've had to deal with chip shortages. How hard has it been to grow and manage Freefly Systems in the last 2-3 years?
Yeah, all those constraints that you mentioned certainly did not make it any easier, right? And especially around the supply chain. I mean, it is just ridiculous now in terms of shipping delays, and just there's no consistency anymore that you used to be able to count on from a lot of these suppliers and vendors. So, it's not their fault. It's upstream of them often, and just kind of one of those things that we have really good transparency and visibility into our supply chain and communication with our suppliers, but some of the stuff you just can't predict. And we've been fortunate at Freefly to kind of take the stance different than a lot of people have taken, of the just-in-time manufacturing. We prefer to buy 6+ months of inventory to have, the spare components on the shelf, and then have at least 3 months of product built and ready to go. So that's something that's differentiated us over the years. Is you can go on our website, you can see all of our pricing. It's very transparent. So we're not trying to hide it from anybody. You can see exactly what it costs, if it's in stock, if it's not, exactly what the lead time is. And 99% of the time, we always have everything on the shelf ready to go, so we can ship it the same day or next day. And again, just something else that's differentiated us when people are in a time crunch.
So the just-in-time production management style is partially to reduce costs and make for a leaner and meaner organization, if you will. It sounds like you guys taken a different approach where you have so much inventory and product basically ready to go. Are you guys self-funded, or do you have investors so that you are able to manage the company in that way? Can you share a little bit about how that works and how you're able to do it this way?
Sure. The company is privately funded. There's no outside investment. Like Max said, it was started in Tab's mom's garage, and they've never taken $1 of outside funding. So we don't owe anybody any money. There's no long-term debt. We don't have to answer to any venture capitalists or anybody else for that matter. So again, we've taken the slow, methodical, high-quality approach to delivering products that we are extremely happy with, and we know are going to put smiles on customers' faces. And we've always taken that approach. We're not going to rush products out just to go, make another dollar or close another deal. We're going to continue to do it the right way and focus on solutions that help our customers ROI and be safer and faster and better at what they do.
No new Astro released right before Christmas and then sending out firmware updates to get everything in good shape.
Not our style. I used to work at companies that do that, so I'm trying to take a different approach now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love hearing that. Yeah. That's awesome.
It can definitely be risky, because what we're doing is we think we're going to need, these chips in these quantities over the next 6 to 9 months or longer. So are we going to risk it and just buy all this stuff and hopefully that works out? And so far, not that I've been the one making these decisions, but the people at Freefly have been making these decisions have been making them correctly, which has really just saved us big time a bunch of times. So
huge shout out to Brent, our supply chain expert. The guy is a wizard.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, how do you do that? How do you look forward 6 to 9 months into the future and figure out what it is that you're going to need 9 months from now? I mean, that's not easy, right? When so many things are changing.
It's extremely
when
hard.
You're right. When you're right, you can just be like, well, I knew this was going to happen. When you're wrong, it's like, well, we guessed and you're wrong. So, truthfully, it's just like looking at models of what we've done in the past and what we expect to do. And sales forecasting. It's not easy to do, and there's some guesswork that goes into it.
Especially now that we've had all these tailwinds with the blue list and all these other opportunities that we've been winning recently, it's just been snowballing exponentially. So, the big orders are coming in faster than ever before. So it's going to become, even more challenging. But
definitely going to talk about the blue part as well pretty soon.
Sure.
We talk to a lot of manufacturers on this show and outside of the show. And to me, it almost feels like in order to be competitive today in this market, you need to be tapping into the consumer drone market, which is cutthroat, which is high volume, in order to help with your production line and everything. Is there any interest there, or is this something that you'd rather let other people do and focus on the big rigs?
Exactly. The latter there. I think I've helped produce a lot of small aircraft that are much smaller than Astro, and those are very interesting. And we certainly get a lot of requests for that type of aircraft. But due to the economics of it, I don't think it makes sense. And I think we're more interested in the more sophisticated payloads that typically end up being a little heavier, and how we really want to figure out how to dial in those workflows so it's extremely easy to use these very sophisticated, very heavy, very complicated sensors. We want to make that workflow easier and really differentiate ourselves in that way.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned consumer drones, because that made my question reappear. I was wondering, since you guys are more focused on commercial drone and enterprise drone applications, is that market perhaps easier to forecast than, let's say, the more volatile consumer drone market?
Yeah, absolutely. That's for sure. And, it's kind of one of those things where their sales cycles are typically longer, especially for our government customers. So they can do a pretty good job of forecasting, when their budgets are going to be coming in and how much those budgets are going to be, et cetera. So, in short, yes.
Yeah. With some of these enterprise customers, they're doing a job that has to get done no matter what's going on in the economy. Like, obviously, they're susceptible to what's going on in the economy, but hopefully the idea with these drones is that they're making the work more efficient, more cost effective. So these jobs have to get done. And whereas with the consumer one, it's like you don't have to go buy a consumer drone depending on what the market's doing. And like Matt said, the process of people ordering these, usually it's like they get a budget, it's a longer process, and they're also ordering larger volumes, not ones or twos. Yeah. So it can be kind of easier to work with.
That makes sense. Who's your competition right now? Who's your biggest competitor, if you don't mind me asking?
DJI. In my opinion, I think if you'd ask different people at our company, they'd all answer with different things. But in my opinion, DJI is our biggest competitor globally. And then we have some American manufacturers that I would consider competitors as well, like Bobby and Inspired Flight.
Yeah. That makes sense. And when you say DJI, you don't mean all their drone models, I would imagine, right? You're talking about specific drones that you compete with?
Yeah, I think kind of the Phantom 4, Inspire 2, Matrice 200 and 300 series, and the 600 now, even though now it's EOL'd. Kind of all of those, Astro and AltaX can provide a lot of similar capabilities to those aircraft that people are familiar with.
Yeah. We're switching gears a little bit. You mentioned Blue as UAS, and I saw that you guys were recently added to that list, so congratulations. Can you talk to us why you submitted an application to be approved for Blue as UAS, and how and why that's important for the future of Freefly?
Sure. I can take that one to start. So in the past, when we were dealing with certain customers, particularly customers who are either part of the federal government or working with the federal government, they would ask, is this drone NDA compliant? Because there's certain rules around that. And then how do you prove that it's NDA compliant? Fill out some paperwork, do some waivers. And even if you were following all the rules, the process was just very long. So when the Blue program came out from DIU, this is like, okay, great. Someone's going to validate that we're an NDA, and we send it in. It's a third party to kind of evaluate our claims, and that will make things go smoothly in the future. As part of the Blue UAS 2.0 program, we're kind of the guinea pigs for DIU. They've done this once, and now they're doing it again. So they're definitely still working out a lot of kinks, and that was, kind of an adventure to figure out some of those kinks and how they will make this process easier in the future. But the reason we did it was just to kind of, we could our drones are already made in the United States, so that part's pretty easy. And just to add that extra layer of confidence that a lot of people have to replace entire fleets of drones right now. So for them, there's a risk in saying, okay, well, should we go buy this other drone that's NDA compliant, or should we buy this one that's blue that we know for sure is been vetted by the government and third-party contractors as well, so they don't have to replace drones again in the future. So for us, it's just been a bit of a process. It's been over a year to get this process done. It's a lot of work. We have some awesome people. Brian Walk on our team has been super helpful getting all that paperwork through. But it just makes it a lot easier for customers to know that what they're doing is going to be within the rules of either their private company or the government organization that they're working within.
Yeah, I mean,
so right now, which of the drones? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say it's pretty incredible. Just coming off of Esri user conference last week, and all the people that reach out to us, how many folks have started asking for this, capability to be NDA compliant and to be blue. And so it's just one more thing that they can kind of check the box to help differentiate themselves to get that job, or to be applicable to certain government where a lot of the service providers are very interested because of that. And we're also sending Astro through the blue certification process right now. So it's gone through all of its penetration testing and a lot of the different checks and stuff that they need to look at. And we're just working on finalizing all of that now. So we're looking forward to it getting added here in the near future as well.
So right now, one of the models right now is approved,
just
right?
The AltaX.
So which models are blue? Just the AltaX right now. Okay. I know we on this show, and myself personally, and I know Haya as well, we've had discussions a lot about the blue UAS and had somewhat been critical of the original list of aircraft because it was fairly restrictive. And then when the US government came up with a 2.0, we were excited to see other companies, including yourself, bringing a different type of drone on board, which I think is very much needed and welcome. Otherwise we're trying to replace something with something that just doesn't exist. We need the drones to be available to replace the one that we can't use. Now, I know we said we weren't going to ask tough questions, but I do have one that we've been, and this is a question that I asked Parrot on the show. I asked Francois a couple of weeks ago when we were here, and because they're also blue UAS, so I want to extend that question to you as well. To me, and I want you to prove me wrong, to me, it looks like we have a lot of drones that could qualify for the standards of as blue UAS or NDA compliant if it wasn't for the fact of country of origin. Why can't we have standards that are based on just that, standards, rather than have a country of origin restriction? What if someone from a country that is not allowed right now could create a drone that meets all these requirements? Why shouldn't we have them on the list?
That's fine with me. I'm not making the rules. But I think that a big reason, there's a few big reasons. I'm sure Matt can add a bunch to this, but what I'll say is I think the U.S. government wants to really help bolster the market of drone innovation in the United States and with our close allies. One of the things is, like, Freefly doesn't really work in military applications. That's not really the market we're after. But we are interested in people like the Department of Interior and the USDA and the Forest Service. So the Blue UAS program is pretty restrictive in terms of like the level of scrutiny that they put on these. And they're figuring this process out. So right now they're putting us through a standard that is basically military grade, pen testing to like look at every single chip and the origin of where it was coming from and any cyber vulnerability. But I do think in the future, well, my hope is in the future that they kind of have a version that's more military-based and one that's more just, federal contractor or civilian contractor based that's not military hardened, because I do think that it is pretty extreme right now. But, I'm not, Matt or I or no one at Freefly is the ones making the rules. But, it's great that we're a part of it, but it is restrictive to a lot of people, and we recognize that.
Yeah, and we want to see the entire industry mature and grow together, right? So it's great that we're on the right side of blue, but I do feel it's difficult for those other other American companies that could be compliant that just haven't had that opportunity yet because they don't have the volume of sales that we do and haven't been around as long as we have. So I think they're working very hard on figuring out new processes and more or less restrictive processes, I should say, to get more people included on the list.
Yeah, it's not hard to imagine that the rules might be slightly different for military use than if you are with the Department of the Interior and you're monitoring forest growth somewhere in the country, of course.
Yeah.
Can you share with us a little bit about the application process itself and how long it takes and what's involved in order to get approved?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it was I don't know if it's last January of 2021 is when we really started. Maybe it was earlier than that, but it was around then. And essentially, we submitted, some kind of application. I can't remember, a couple pages of what we do. Then we do a presentation to a bunch of folks with DIU and a few other organizations. We do some flight testing, and that's kind of the preliminary. Then there's some more presentations and applications. And then we get into the fun stuff, which was we had to bring, I can't remember if it was 3 or 5 aircraft out to the Air Force Academy. The reason behind that was to show, like, these aren't one-offs. Like, you could open 5 different boxes. They're all going to be the same. They're production. We'll be able to supply these to, customers in the future. So we had to show these 5 different aircraft, and they had a bunch of criteria that was showing, geofencing and, a lot of basic stuff, RTL, just to show that the drones worked. And that was also at high altitude. So I think it's Colorado Springs on a hot day. I can't remember what the altitude, but somewhere between 5 and 8,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And that was a flight demo. And then once that's approved, they go into, I think in November, they announced the list of, like, here's who we've selected. And then we get into the fun stuff of we send it to a third party company that the DIU has selected, and that's the pen testing. So they're looking at, hardware and software and different cyber vulnerabilities. They make a long list of, like, this could be a vulnerability, like, how could you mitigate this? A lot of them for us were pretty simple. So it was like Wi-Fi is a vulnerability, SD card, things like that. So we didn't have any big gotchas there. We just made some mitigations. And then from there, it's kind of a back and forth. And then you go through an ATO process, and then they launch it.
Yeah, so simple. That ATO is an authority to operate. And so essentially, all of these different government organizations don't have to recreate that entire process. They can kind of skip some of that process because of this ATO. They still have a whole bunch of due diligence to do after the fact, but it just kind of makes that process more expeditious and reduces, taxpayer time and money and all that.
So they qualify and vet you for a military grade level, if you will, and if you meet those specs or requirements, then you automatically qualify for Department of Interior or anything else that's less strict than the military use would be.
Correct.
Yeah, it's not, I wouldn't say it's automatic, but like if a lot of organizations are it's a little bit cloudy of like, well, is NDA good enough or is blue good enough? So a lot of people are still figuring that out. And a lot of people are just like, well, blue is definitely going to be good enough. So let's just go with that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Which is at a higher level than NDA.
Right.
Yeah.
If you qualify for blue, you would for NDA down the road.
Yeah, blue is NDA. It's just been basically vetted very, stringently by a third party. Because technically, anyone can say they're NDA, but then it's up to the user or somebody else to figure out, or all the chips, where are they made? Are they, if microprocessors are a big one that you could have back doors in. So that's really how I view it.
It's an audit of your NDA compliance and additional verification checks and penetration testing to make sure everything's encrypted and secure and safe. So
having qualified to be a blue UAS provider now, has production capability come to mind as a possible issue? Or are you guys starting to sweat bullets that you may have to create a lot of drones all of a sudden if the demand really comes in?
Yeah, we've absolutely been seeing that demand come in already. It's been a significant uptick in the number of inquiries and leads that are asking for AltaX Blue specifically. So, something we're monitoring closely and being very transparent with those customers about, hey, this is what's available and when it's available, and here's a lead time. we have to do some. It's a bit of a different configuration than we typically sell. So there's some special caveats to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the future.
So if I come to you,
I was going to say in the future we have a blue version and a non-blue version. And I think in the future, 100% our goal is to just have one version that happens to be blue. It's a challenge for us to have multiple different versions.
We built the AltaX 3 years ago before blue was anyone had ever heard of blue. So, it's kind of been grandfathered in, and obviously moving forward, we want to just have one configuration to make it very simple. So anyone that buys an AltaX in the future would just get the blue version.
Yeah, helps with inventory and it helps with production capability. Now, if I came to you today and I said I want a blue AltaX, how long until I get it?
Just one?
It depends how many. Yeah, exactly. Depends who you are and how many you're asking for. So we're prioritizing our government customers that really require it, right? And so we want to, ensure that the folks that absolutely must have it, that they're getting access to it. And then those other folks that say, it's a nice to have, but I don't necessarily need it tomorrow. We're working with them to give them, maybe it's a couple month lead time for those folks.
And when we're talking about large government orders, like what is large? Is that 10 drones, 100 drones, 10,000 drones? Like what are we talking about?
Hundreds of drones for individual customers.
Wow. So that's a whole different ballgame all of a sudden.
Yeah. It's a lot of drones overnight.
A lot of inventory that you need to buy, I would imagine, if you buy 6-9 months ahead.
Well, that's right.
Yeah. Yep. I keep wanting to shout out all our team members because the whole team at Freefly is just incredible, and the guy who runs the production lead is just the man, and also all the people who do the assembly and everything. They're awesome, and so for me, it's like, oh great, this is gonna be awesome, guys. Let's just, if we need to, all the engineers will hop on the assembly line and start building stuff. So, but we got a pretty dialed in system.
Yeah, it's pretty scalable.
How long does it take to build an AltaX?
We build in sub-assemblies, so that's not exactly a fair question. But we can build 20 a week, for example.
Now we've seen reports in the news that blue SUAS or blue drones are significantly more expensive, and that DJI and Autel deliver the same drones with the same capabilities for a lot less, like tenfold less, they argue. Yeah. Is that true in your eyes? I mean,
which DJI drone can carry 35 pounds?
Yeah.
Heavy lift might be tough.
Yeah. Well, in general, the blue version of the Alta is a little bit more expensive, and that mainly comes down to the controller. There's not a whole lot difference in the drone, but the controller is a lot more expensive, and then also the type of tracking and paperwork that we have to do with every single drone is a lot more work for us too. So it is definitely not our intention to there are some companies who are charging a lot for a blue drone. We want to keep all the prices the same. We did have to raise the price on the blue one a little bit, just mainly because of the controller and some of those initial cumbersome processes that we have to do. But the goal is certainly just keep it in line with the rest of our product line. That's where we're heading. And when we were just at this Esri user conference last week, and it's been funny to watch how the industry has evolved. But when we say, okay, well, an AltaX starts at $18,000, most people are like, oh, wow, that's a really good deal. Some people are still like, oh, that's really expensive. But certain customers will be on a construction job with these, and they'll be saving hundreds of thousands of dollars per job with the data they have. So for them, it's like, oh, 20 grand to save hundreds of thousands of dollars. One of the, so it's a specialized piece of equipment, but it's also made in the U.S.
18 grand for what you get is not
unreasonable. And the Astro starts at 12,500. And one of the great things about it, and that we've tried to be a big part of the open source community over the last decade. And so it has several of those standards that have been built into it. So the first one is the PiXL Payload Bus standard, and what that allows us to do is share that with everybody that wants to integrate it on their sensor, on their gimbal, on their any kind of payload that would strap onto the bottom of Astro, and it would become plug and play. So we've sent these smart dovetail development kits out to all of the OEM payload manufacturers that we think people would be interested in, and said, hey, please integrate this mechanical interface into your sensor or into your gimbal, and it'll just be plug and play on Astro. So over the next few months here, we're going to have dozens of payloads that are just going to be plug and play for Astro, and then we're also upgrading AltaX with that same capability.
Mm-hmm. And either, I was going to say, other Grimsby, another gimbal manufacturer, they're making a version that has that same dovetail. I've seen a bunch of other drones. I think that Watts either was just experimenting with it or he's planning on using it. So that's great. Like, we want to see this kind of standardization across. It makes it a lot easier for customers and for the industry.
Yeah, we took our mapping payload, the Sony A7 R4 that we have launched on Astro on our gimbal, and we took it over at Exponential and walked it over to Bobby's drone, plugged it in, and it worked. So nice. How powerful is that? Without any collaboration between our companies at all, you can now mix and match payloads and drones and radios, etc. So it's going to become this really powerful set of open standards that the entire community is developing, and Freefly has been spearheading for a long time. And we're really excited to see the entire industry, grow, and all of our domestic competition and friends rise together.
That's cool. We talked to Romeo Dersher from Otarian quite a bit, actually twice on this show, and he's obviously, as you know, a big proponent of this standardization. Any thoughts on putting Otarian on some of your equipment to help with that?
Yeah, the Otarian's on the Skynode now, on the Astro now. The Otarian Skynode. We have our own OEM version of it, so it's based on their reference design, but that's on the Astro, and that whole suite is awesome.
Yeah, so any Astro users are going to be able to automatically use that Otarian suite to do fleet maintenance tracking and understand the health of their drones, and their pilots are in compliance, and you can look at your flight logs, and it visualizes everything and organizes everything for you nice and neat in the cloud. And it's all automated, so there's no manually remembering, oh, I did this flight and entering all this data about it. It's all just uploaded to the cloud because you have an LTE connectivity in Astro. So you can actually put a SIM card in there of your choice and have all that information in real time. It also brings in maps real time. And you can even kind of get rid of the SD card in some workflows if you can have enough bandwidth over your cell phone connection to start sending that imagery back up to your cloud or your AWS server, wherever it is that you store your data. You may be able to remove the SD card, which is a pretty powerful efficiency in some people's workflows.
Yeah, I know some people in Otarian will be happy if we can ditch the SD card, right, Romeo?
That's for sure.
Yeah. Also sounds like the drone industry is getting much more mature very quickly, which is definitely a good thing. Going back to Blue SUS real quick. So we had the first iteration, a rough idea. The second one is already much better, Blue SUS 2.0. Is there any news about a third iteration coming anytime soon, or?
I don't know of any news of a third, but I know that the end goal was to have like a process, right, that anyone can kind of just sign up for, like a rolling or maybe yearly or quarterly. The last I heard, that was the goal. So right now, like, the door is closed unless you're on that list, you can't submit. But obviously that's not sustainable because there'll be new companies or companies who didn't get on that 2.0. So the goal is to have a process, and who knows what that process is going to look like in the end, or when it will be available. But I'm looking forward to the day when it's a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more sussed out, so other people can join too.
And one of the other things that they're having to think through, they didn't have to think through in the 1.0, was all 5 of those drones in the first group use the exact same camera, and it wasn't an interchangeable camera. It wasn't an interchangeable payload. So it's very easy for them to verify, hey, this exact configuration is safe and secure. But with AltaX being able to carry 35 pounds of whatever you want underneath there, we can't send them every single payload that we've ever integrated into AltaX. There's hundreds or maybe even thousands of different payloads with slightly different IMUs and slightly different whatever. So we're trying to work with them also to, again, on these kind of open standards, say, hey, we want to plug and play radios from 5 different OEM radio manufacturers on the same day, but we want it all to be the same blue configuration or be blue capable, right? No matter what radio I switch out that day, what payload I switch out that day, I put some different landing gear on there, et cetera. We want those to to be interchangeable and kind of mix and matched in real time, and not have to have a specific blue configuration and specific part number for each one of those. It would just be a nightmare. So working with them on things like that too, so that this whole industry can kind of come together. And it's my dream for our customers to be able to look at their shelf in their storage room and pick whatever drone, whatever payload, whatever radio they need for that day that's going to give them the best capabilities to do that job the most efficiently way.
Wow. Sounds like a dream.
Yes, that
sounds fun.
Yeah.
Yep. No, that's that. I love it. I love it. You guys have been around this industry for a while, building drones and building things. What are some of the cool trends that you're seeing right now that get you excited about building the next drone, the next technology? What is that? What would you like to see in the drone next?
Well, a lot of what Matt was just talking about with the standardization, I'm most excited about. When, going to these trade shows over the last 10 years, you'd see all this really cool technology. You're like, wow, this is so cool. Like, what flight controllers does it work with? Does it work with ArduPilot? Does it work with PX4? And they're like, no, what's that? Right? So it's like all these individuals were making cool parts of drones or sensors or whatever, but they weren't talking to each other. And now from the drone code and PX4, ArduPilot community, and Auterion, of course, really starting to link up a little bit more so that you can go to a booth and see, oh, it's got this standard. My drone has that standard too. That's great. I think Auterion has done a good job of kind of wrangling the cats, as well as the drone code group. So I'm really excited about that. Then we have the payload standard. The next one I'm excited about is the radio standard, to be able to swap out radios easy. So I would say that's probably what I'm most excited about, is just seeing this technology. DJI has done a phenomenal job with their product development, and they have been crushing it, and that's great. Credits due there, but it's great to see all these other companies coming up with new ideas and being able to standardize and kind of use these new building blocks across different platforms.
Yeah, and one of the fun things that I'm really interested in with Astro is it has an onboard mission computer. So it's kind of, again, one of these, the sky's the limit thing. What kind of crazy algorithms and computer vision and different things or programs are people going to run on these computers to really eke out that extra 10% in their workflow efficiency and dial those and even that much more.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit with the SDK and like what the DJI SDK has allowed for the industry, and to see that now coming over to what Auterion's doing and what Freefly is doing and a bunch of other groups to allow other folks to build businesses on top of this workflow and this infrastructure is going to be.
I remember a couple of years ago during DJI Airworks, they showed how the SDK program had taken off, and it had taken off beyond their wildest dreams as well. That opening it up and making their equipment available for other manufacturers just open up all these opportunities, and people just ran with it. So I can imagine that must have been a game changer. One of the things that I'm personally excited about is the use of FPV drones in feature films, where you see that action happening, but now you, as the viewer, are part of the action because you're kind of flying around the scene. Since you guys cater to cinema as well, are there any future plans potentially for a Freefly FPV drone that would carry a decent sized camera and be able to record like that?
Well, everyone here is super passionate about that. If you were to walk around, at least I'm on the East Coast office, there's Tiny Whoop rings all over the office. So everyone here is doing this because they love it. And there's always talk about it. We got a lot of priorities and we don't want to spread ourselves thin, but that's something that we're certainly interested in it. And that's, you're right. That's like so cool to see on the film industry. And when I'm test flying AltaXs, sometimes we'll put a digital FPV or analog FPV and just, that's not a race quad, but it's pretty fun to rip those things around in FPV.
I want to see a Movi Carbon on an FPV just flying around.
Yeah, mini Movi Carbon with a wave camera on top mounted. It's awesome.
I tell you the video of, and this is a few years old now, but the video of the Movi on that electric bike with that arm in the front, just driving around the lake. That I just love that video. It's just so crazy.
That Movi Carbon's incredible.
Yeah, we got some amazing imagery that's been coming off of Wave too. Our high speed camera. We got to send you guys to see some of these clips. It's just unreal.
Yeah, to tie into the FPV, the Wave, I think, is the first camera that can continuously roll at high speeds like that. Most high-speed cameras you hit, and it's like a 15-second buffer, which is cool for a lot of things. But to hit record on a Wave and then go, shred on an FPV drone, the stuff that Johnny FPV did last year with that Porsche in the sand, and there's so many other applications that we've seen just amazing footage. So yeah,
I remember seeing. I think the first clip I saw was skiers going down a slope and hitting a few jumps, and as they were spinning in the air, we were flying around them and watching them spin. I was like, "This is going to be the next James Bond film. Like it has to be in big movies like that." No, I think it's awesome. I think, you're up next, Greg. I was just looking at the list.
Yeah, I was going to shift gear actually. I was going to talk about remote ID. We just talked to Kenji a couple hours ago actually, and we were talking about manufacturers and how they were going to work with the mandate that's coming right around the corner in 2 months of meeting remote ID requirement for production drones. What are your thoughts? Anything you can share? Or is this something you've been worried about? Is this something you've been working on, or is this something that's not even on the radar?
Well, it's definitely on the radar because it has to be. Like we can't ignore this, but it does seem like totally not a flushed out idea at all. From the regulatory side, there's kind of like this loose. And Kenji probably can speak to this better than us, but there's this loose idea of we're going to have these different broadcast or Bluetooth methods, but there doesn't really seem like what's the actual technical roadmap for how this is going to be implemented. On the Astro and on the Alta, it'll be pretty easy for us to adopt once there is a more of a standard. But right now, it seems like open-ended questions a lot around that would be probably an understatement, actually. But so we'll be ready for it when it comes.
Are you worried?
I'm not really worried about it.
Are you worried that this is 2 months away?
No, because we'll be in the same. No one else has some like secret tool to like allow this to happen. It seems like they're going to have to push it back, I would assume, unless they want to ground the entire drone fleet, but wouldn't put it past.
We're hoping it's an easy software change, but you never know what they decide. We'll jump however high they say jump.
Yeah, they have an LTE connection in the drones, or we have LTE connections in the drones. So, like, being able to kind of do a software fix or a patch to be compliant would be probably one of the easier ways. But we also want to have ways for people to comply when there's no cell phone service. Like, there's got to be other ways to do this as well.
So. Yeah, networked or not networked.
Mm-hmm. So who's the burden on right now at this stage from your point of view? Is it on the FAA to approve means of compliance? Is it on someone to submit means of compliance to be approved? Where's the holdup?
Yeah, I think everybody is looking for more guidance from the FAA, frankly, and exactly which solutions apply and what would be compliant. So.
Yeah, it seems like they kind of came up with some broad standards, like, oh, well, you could use Bluetooth, and then anyone with a phone can then connect to it on Bluetooth. It's like, we're not, first of all, like, have you ever had a Bluetooth speaker and, like, walked into the other room? So, like, obviously there's types of Bluetooth that will go longer range, but, like, I don't know if it's going to work the way they think in that application. So that's one of those open-ended questions. And I think that they're waiting for private industry to jump in here and just, like, finish the ad lib that they kind of started here, or the picture they started.
Yep.
No, I agree. So, apart from all the technical challenges and network challenges and whatnot, what do you guys think about the idea of making the pilot location available when you're flying a not inexpensive drone? Available to the public, I mean.
It seems like a crazy security risk to me. I mean, I've had over the, 10, 20 years I've been doing this, people come up to me and say, I have a shotgun and I was going to shoot at you until I realized that you weren't, like, spying on me. So that's rare. It's not very common. But, like, we've had customers who go, oh, like, look at my prop. There's a piece of bird shot in here because someone tried to shoot my drone down. I feel like not a good idea. It seems like you can't do that with a plane. You can't do that with a car. Now, granted, there are good things, good intentions behind the remote ID thing, and it's not like I'm a blanket against it. I just think let's weigh the risks here and what are we actually trying to solve. I think that a lot of people in the FAA and the aerospace industry think the sky is going to be blackened by delivery drones and unpiloted human carrying drones. So they want to get ready for that, and who knows when that's going to be happening. So I kind of get where the intention is, but I don't. The execution seems to be a bit.
Greg and I have done about 60 of these shows now. I would say that at least half of them we talk about remote ID, and we have yet to find anybody who's like, "Yeah, great idea, make my location public. I love it." Like everybody's like, "Nope." And
imagine if you're like, your job is a security, doing a perimeter around a nuclear facility, and then all someone would have to do is open their remote ID app and be like, all right, there's the guard, there's the drone, let me just wait. Okay, now I'm going to go in. So like,
it doesn't make much sense. And that whole analogy of like, oh, it's a license plate in the sky is like, no, it's not, because a license plate, you still need to be a law enforcement officer in order to be able to find out who actually the car is registered to. And that's not the same as what remote ID dictates. All right, so here's a fun question, and to both of you. Let's say you were in charge of the FAA for the next 5 years. I know they're looking for a new guy anyway to run the show. What would you do differently? It's Friday afternoon.
Well, I don't envy that job. Yeah.
No,
I don't envy that job. Matt, you go first, and then I'll copy what you say.
Yeah, no, I don't have a crystal ball, and there's no one size fits all solution. It's obviously going to need to be tailored to the performance of the aircraft and the risk of the application. So what I would love to see is somebody that builds out, a Lance Plus type of software tool that could not only help you understand the airspace and where you can fly and can't fly, but how risky that operation is based on the performance of your aircraft, how much your aircraft weighs, what you're going to be doing with that aircraft. Are you going to be flying over a population density of 1 or of 1 million people? And there's some automated algorithm to help us understand that risk of each individual flight. We could then ensure and mitigate against those risks much better. And so I think software tools like that could be helpful, but again, that's not something the FAA is going to develop. So don't have a good answer for you on that specific question.
Yeah, I would say like there's a lot of the rules in the past with 333 and some 107 and going forward with remote ID have been based on general aviation rules. And I get why they're doing that. And I think that's a good base model, but we should also look at the general aviation rules are written in such a way because they're trying to mitigate risk of an actual airplane with actual people flying over cities or whatever. So we should look at, make some kind of risk of evaluation of like, well, if the person's flying for hobby and they're in a park, do they have to have the same rules versus, someone flying an AltaX downtown Philly for a movie or something like that. So I do think that there's not really an emphasis on proficiency in flying drones for drone licensing. A lot of people come up and say, well, I'm a 107 drone pilot, and that's awesome. But it doesn't really tell me anything if you have ever flown a drone before, because you don't, there's a lot of complexity that goes into setting up a testing regime. But I think focusing more on, practical, like who's flying these things, how are they flying these things, and, more feedback from manufacturers who are not, Google or Amazon, That would be cool.
Well, that's perfect. You step right into my next question, which is a loaded question. Let's talk about drone delivery. Is it a good idea? Is it something that's good for testing? Is it something that's never going to be reliable in the future? And this is a very personal question, of how do you feel about that?
I think that what Zipline's doing is so cool. In places where, they were doing a bunch of stuff. I think it was in Uganda. I can't remember if it was Uganda, but they were doing a bunch of stuff overseas, and that was fantastic for medical deliveries. I could picture in Puerto Rico when they had the hurricane, or Haiti, earthquakes, being able to bring emergency supplies. I think that's an awesome way, because you're actually doing something. You're actually solving a problem. You're not coming up with a solution and then finding a problem to stuff it down, right? So when there's roads not accessible, things like that. It seems like that for urban air delivery seems like it doesn't seem practical to me. It seems like it'd be easier to have a remote control UPS truck than a remote control air vehicle. Not to say that won't be easier in the future. In the future, that might be easier. I don't know if I also want to live in a world where there's like, as much as I love RC planes and RC drones, like I don't know if I want them buzzing over all the time and what problem that's really solving. Amazon delivery trucks are like incredibly efficient right now, at least for where I live. And the places where they're not very efficient, which would be in a very rural area where you have to send one truck really far out, then a drone might be worth it. But the money that would cost for the infrastructure is no longer worth it. So I hope that it's a thing one day, but I don't know what it would look like, and it doesn't seem practical right now.
Thank you. That's a great answer.
Yeah,
100% agree.
Yeah. The Wendover Productions did a great video on YouTube.
I saw
that kind of talks about the.
We had Wingcopter on the show, and he said the same thing. It's like if you're flying A to B routes. Or business to business as well, like what Zipline is doing, for instance, it makes sense. If you're flying from a Walmart store and you're delivering, I don't know, deodorant or toothpaste to people in the neighborhoods, that's a whole different. It's way more complex, and he was saying that it wouldn't be economically viable anyway. It'd be too complicated and too expensive to do those kind of small deliveries. So, I guess the future or time will tell. Is there any? Sorry, go ahead.
We have one application. We said business to business. It's kind of business to business. We have a bunch of people who use this for logging, and they're like, "Oh, I need to bring some tools up." Like you have a guy who's like up on the side, or lady up on the side of the mountain, and you can have to bushwhack up a whole pile of tools, or just use the Alta to like bring them some tools, or like bring run a wire or something like that. Like just watching those videos of those is pretty entertaining and practical. So I'm all
is there any new technology that you would like to see make its way into the drone world?
I think more vision avoidance stuff, like what Skydio is doing, I like to see that just become more prevalent, which is obviously the trend. We're working on that. It seems like everyone's working on that. So I'm excited for that. And then, battery technology, it's not just for drones, it's for everybody. It seems like we've made lots of incremental steps in lithium batteries, but hopefully the next thing is a massive jump, and not only for the environmental impact of lithium and just the supply of lithium, but also, or the ingredients in lithium batteries also, but for the energy density. I'm excited for one day when the energy density of these
smaller, lighter, more capacity, and fast charging.
Yeah. I mean, for cars, you can imagine we're now competing against Ford F-150s soon for the materials. So there's going to be a big need for that.
I think.
Awesome. Well, I think we're getting close to the end of the show. I do have a question that we always ask our guest, which is, what is your favorite
Freefly drone, of course, but you can.
AltaX, hands down. Having that much power in your hands is and it just flies, like it's on rails. It's incredible how much agility it has for being that big.
Yeah. I honestly, if I'm talking multi-rotor, the AltaX is like, it's hard to not have a hurting face after because of smiles, but you can have a big payload on there and you can go 70 miles an hour and just a thump of those active props. That just sounds so cool. But I also like to fly a lot of fixed wing, so I have a bunch of mini Talons and nano Talons. So for fixed wing stuff,
that's cool.
I like those kind of drones.
By the way, that active blade stabilization technology is just like mind-boggling to me. I just love watching the video where you guys balance, and it's just amazing.
Yeah, it sounds so cool.
It's amazing.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you guys so much for joining us on a Friday afternoon. It was awesome and a pleasure to talk to both of you and to learn more about Freefly Systems.
Absolutely, thanks for having us.
Great being
awesome.
here.